What if the seemingly innocent act of helping a researcher led a librarian and her son into the darkest shadows of the Cold War? It sounds head-shaking, right? The air in the deserted library hung thick with the smell of old paper and dust. Rain hammered against the large, Gothic windows, each gust of wind a ghostly sigh. Brenda, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, strained to hear anything over the storm. Every shadow seemed to stretch, to twist into a menacing shape. Her hand, trembling slightly, gripped the ancient brass lamp on the reference desk. She wasn't alone. She knew she wasn't alone. Across the vast, silent hall, a muffled thud. Then a whisper, barely audible above the storm, cutting through the silence like a knife. Brenda, Justin. Just hours earlier, this had been a quiet haven, a place of hushed whispers and turning pages. A place Brenda had nurtured for 20 years, where her son, Justin, had spent countless afternoons lost in adventure stories. But now it was a trap, a battlefield, and they were caught right in the middle. The man they'd welcomed, the polite, reserved academic who'd sought out the most obscure texts, had somehow become their captor. Or worse, how did it come to this? How did a small-town librarian and her tech-savvy son go from shelving books to dodging danger in the dead of night, all because of a single, mysterious researcher? The answer lies not just in the past, but in the pages of history itself, screaming a truth far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. But before we dive deeper, if you're fascinated by the hidden battles of Cold War, also if you love your mom, then like and subscribe. It means a lot to us. We appreciate your support. And comment your favorite moments in the video. For Brenda Miller, life in Sterling, Pennsylvania was a well-worn path. It was comfortable, predictable. She was the head librarian at the Sterling Public Library, a sprawling, albeit slightly run-down brick building that stood as a testament to simpler times. Her days were a familiar rhythm, cataloging new acquisitions, guiding teenagers through term papers, helping retirees trace their family trees. It wasn't glamorous, but it was important. It was her domain, and she loved it. Her son, Justin, a bright, somewhat introverted college student home for the summer, was her world. He spent his mornings coding for a local startup, his afternoons buried in fantasy novels, or tinkering with old electronics in the library's quiet corners. Their life was ordinary, safe, until he walked in. It was a Tuesday afternoon, late spring. The kind of day where the air was sweet with the promise of summer, but the library remained a cool, hushed sanctuary. The front doors swung open, letting in a shaft of sunlight that illuminated the swirling dust motes, and a man stepped inside. He wasn't remarkable at first glance. Mid-50s, perhaps, with impeccably neat gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a neatly pressed tweed jacket, despite the rising temperatures. He carried an expensive leather briefcase that looked a little out of place in their modest library. His name, he said, was Dr. Elias Thorne. He explained in a quiet, measured voice with an accent Brenda couldn't quite place, European, perhaps Eastern European, but subtle, a visiting scholar. He was researching obscure Cold War-era technological advancements and their societal impact. He needed access to the library's historical archives, specifically government documents, local newspapers from the 1950s and 60s, and any uncatalogued ephemera related to local industry and military facilities. Brenda, ever the professional, gave him a warm, if slightly guarded, welcome. Sterling wasn't exactly a hub for international academics. Most researchers who came through were local historians or students. Dr. Thorne's request, while unusual in its specificity, wasn't entirely unheard of. The library did have a surprisingly robust collection of local history, thanks to a few dedicated benefactors over the decades. She assigned him a quiet corner desk, tucked away near the microfilm readers, where he could work undisturbed. He thanked her politely, his eyes scanning the vast room, lingering for a moment on the security camera in the far corner, a recent, much-debated addition. A small shiver, fleeting and irrational, ran down Brenda's spine. It was nothing, she told herself, just a man doing his job, but even then something about him felt off, too precise, too quiet. like a perfectly polished stone that didn't quite belong in the riverbed. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Thorne became a fixture. He arrived precisely at opening, left precisely at closing. He never made small talk beyond a polite "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," or "Thank you, Mr. Miller," if Justin happened to be nearby. He brought his own thermos of coffee, never used the library's machine. His requests for materials became increasingly arcane. He wasn't interested in the headline stories of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, or the space race. He wanted to know about obscure local patents for industrial machinery from the 1950s. He requested blueprints for an abandoned textile mill that had briefly dabbled in government contracts during WWAI. He spent hours poring over community college yearbooks from the early 60s, his fingers tracing faces in grainy photographs. It was all so tangential, so unconnected, or so it seemed, to the grand sweep of Cold War history. Brenda, whose professional life revolved around connecting information, found herself increasingly puzzled. "What exactly are you hoping to find, Dr. Thorne?" she'd once asked, trying to break through his professional reserve with a touch of genuine curiosity. He'd smiled faintly, a thin, almost bloodless smile. "Just dots, Mrs. Miller, connecting dots that others might have overlooked. The true history, you see, is often found in the margins." His answer was perfectly reasonable, perfectly vague. And yet, it did nothing to quell the growing prickle of unease Brenda felt whenever he was near. Justin, initially oblivious, started noticing things too. He'd seen Dr. Thorne meticulously sketching diagrams from old engineering journals, not taking photos like a modern researcher, but drawing by hand with an almost obsessive detail. He'd seen him pause over seemingly unremarkable advertisements in decades-old newspapers, his brow furrowed in concentration. One afternoon, Justin was debugging a faulty projector in the microfilm room when he heard Dr. Thorne mutter something under his breath in a language he didn't recognize. It wasn't German or French or Spanish, languages Justin had picked up bits of from movies and games. It sounded guttural, hard-edged. When Dr. Thorne realized Justin was there, he immediately stiffened, clearing his throat and switching back to his impeccable if accented English. "Just a thought, young man," he'd said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Sometimes, when one is deep in thought, old habits resurface." The Sterling Public Library wasn't just a place of books, it was a repository of the town's memory. Every dusty tome, every fragile newspaper clipping, every meticulously labeled photograph held a piece of Sterling's past. Brenda knew these archives intimately. She knew the quirks of the cataloging system, the hidden treasures tucked away in forgotten boxes. She also knew that information, like any tool, could be used for many purposes. As Dr. Thorne continued his esoteric research, Brenda found herself looking at her beloved library through a different lens. She saw not just knowledge, but potential vulnerability. Dr. Thorne's requests grew even more specific. He wasn't just interested in the content of the local newspapers. He was interested in the advertisements. Not the big department store ads, but the small, classified notices. The ones placed by individuals seeking lost pets, offering tutoring, or selling old farm equipment. He'd spend hours comparing these ads from different issues, spanning years, making meticulous notes in a small, leather-bound notebook he always kept with him. "These microhistories, Mrs. Miller," he'd explained once, "they provide a fascinating glimpse into the everyday lives of ordinary people. Essential context for understanding the technological shifts of the era." Brenda nodded, but her mind whirred. Context for what? She watched him, often from behind the computer screen at her desk, pretending to work but really observing. She noticed how he never checked out books. He always left them on his desk, marked with tiny, unobtrusive slips of paper, and then without fail, Brenda or Justin would find them neatly stacked, ready for reshelving by the end of the day. He seemed to handle the fragile old documents with almost surgical precision, never leaving a crease, never marking a page. It was efficient. Too efficient. One afternoon, a delivery of new books came in. A hefty box from a university press, filled with academic tomes on modern European history. As Brenda sorted through them, she realized one title was missing from the packing slip, a slim volume on Soviet intelligence operations during the early Cold War. She paused. It was an odd discrepancy. She remembered ordering it vaguely months ago, but it wasn't here. She shrugged it off as a clerical error. A week later, she found the very same book already processed, already with its library barcode, sitting on Dr. Thorne's desk. He hadn't checked it out. He hadn't requested it. It was simply there. Brenda picked it up, a strange jolt going through her. "Dr. Thorne," she began, trying to keep her voice even, "I don't recall you requesting this title. It just came in last week." He looked up from his notes, his face utterly unperturbed. "Oh, did it, Mrs. Miller? I must have seen it on the new acquisitions cart. My apologies, I presumed it was available for perusal. We usually have a waiting list for new arrivals, especially specialized titles like this," Brenda said, her voice a little sharper than she intended. He merely smiled. "Indeed, my apologies for presuming. I will return it to the cart immediately." He reached for the book, his fingers brushing hers. There was a sudden electric chill. His hand was cold, too cold. Later that day, Brenda mentioned the incident to Justin. He was less dismissive. "Mom, that's weird. How would he even know it was on the new acquisitions cart? You keep that stuff in the back room until it's processed." "Maybe he saw me unpacking it," Brenda mused, though she couldn't recall him being anywhere near the receiving area. "Or maybe," Justin said, his eyes narrowed, "he's been in the back room." The thought sent another shiver down Brenda's spine, this one colder and sharper. The back room, where rare books were kept, where the staff personal lockers were, where the security camera feed was monitored, and where no patron was allowed unsupervised. But how? The door was always locked. That evening, after Dr. Thorne had left, Brenda did something she hadn't done in years. She stayed late, long after closing, not to finish work but to investigate. She walked the silent aisles, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She checked the locks on the back room door. They seemed secure. She checked the security camera footage for the day. Nothing overtly suspicious. Dr. Thorne was seen only at his assigned desk or walking to the restrooms. But as she fast-forwarded through the footage, she noticed a subtle pattern. Each time she or Justin left the immediate vicinity of the reference desk or the back room, Dr. Thorne would stand up, stretch, and walk to the drinking fountain, which was strategically placed, offering a clear view of the staff-only doors. He wasn't just getting water, he was watching. He was observing their movements. He was mapping the library. Brenda knew her gut feeling wasn't just paranoia. Not anymore. The cold hand, the misplaced book, the subtle surveillance, these were not the actions of an ordinary academic. She couldn't shake the image of Dr. Thorne's eyes, distant and calculating behind those wire-rimmed glasses. She was a librarian, not a spy, but she understood systems. She understood patterns. And the pattern she was seeing now was deeply unsettling. She needed help. And the only person she truly trusted, the only one close enough to this unfolding mystery, was her son, Justin. That night, over lukewarm takeout and the persistent drumming of rain, Brenda laid out her concerns to Justin. She described the new book incident, the cold hand, the subtle surveillance she'd observed on the security footage. Justin listened, his usual half-smile fading, replaced by a thoughtful frown. "You're saying he's casing the joint, Mom?" he asked, trying to lighten the mood, but his voice lacked conviction. "I don't know what I'm saying, honey," Brenda admitted, rubbing her temples. "But something is wrong, I feel it. He's not here for the reasons he claims." Justin, with his generation's innate skepticism and tech-savvy approach to problem-solving, quickly dismissed the idea of him being a common thief. "For what, Mom? Old microfiches, ancient yearbooks. He's not going to fence those." "Exactly," Brenda exclaimed. "That's why it's so unsettling. What is he looking for?" They brainstormed. What if he wasn't just looking for information in the library, but information about the library? Or information about Sterling itself? Brenda recounted his detailed interest in local industry, in specific addresses, in the small classified ads. He asked for every local phone directory from 1950 to 1970, she said, remembering. Every single one. Justin's eyes widened. Phone directories, that's specific, like who lived where, what numbers they had, cross-referencing names. Precisely, Brenda nodded, a new piece clicking into place. And those textile mill blueprints and the community college yearbooks. He spent days on those. Okay, Mom, Justin said, pushing his plate aside. If he's looking for patterns, we should too. Let's see if we can find out who Elias Thorne really is. The next day, Justin put his digital skills to use. While Brenda handled her duties at the library, always keeping a watchful eye on Dr. Thorne, Justin began a deep dive into Elias Thorne. The first searches were frustrating. A doctor. Elias Thorne did exist. A respected, albeit obscure, historian specializing in European industrial development. He taught at a small university in the Netherlands. His biography was public, his publications listed. He even had a Wikipedia page, albeit a short one. Everything seemed perfectly legitimate. See, Mom, Justin said, presenting his findings on his laptop screen later that evening. He's legit. You just got spooked. Brenda stared at the screen, at the crisp photo of the academic, a much younger man with a full beard and a more relaxed demeanor than the Dr. Thorne currently inhabiting her library. No, she said slowly, her finger tracing the contours of the face on the screen. No, this isn't him. The man in the library, his hair is gray, yes, but he's clean-shaven. And his eyes, they're different, colder. This man, the one in the photo, has warmth in his eyes. Justin scoffed. Mom, people change, beards come and go. Not that much, Justin. Look at the jawline, the slope of the nose. It's similar, but it's not exact. And the age. This photo looks like it's from at least 10, maybe 15 years ago. If he's mid-50s now, he'd be late 30s, early 40s here. And the man in the library carries himself like someone who's seen more than just academic life. More disciplined. Brenda's librarian's eye for detail, honed by years of spotting subtle discrepancies in records, was now focused on a very different kind of puzzle. Justin, though initially skeptical, couldn't deny his mother's conviction. He zoomed in on the photo. He searched for more recent images of the real Dr. Thorne. There were none readily available online. This was odd for a contemporary academic. Most professors had updated faculty photos, conference appearances, social media profiles. This Dr. Thorne seemed to exist only in a few dated academic listings. Okay, Justin conceded, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. So, our Dr. Thorne is using someone else's identity, but why this one, and who is he really? Brenda paced the small living room. He chose an obscure academic, someone who likely wouldn't be recognized, someone whose field of study vaguely aligns with his own, or at least, the one he claims to have. It's a perfect cover, but the gaps, the lack of recent information, that's the tell. The revelation that Dr. Elias Thorne was an imposter ignited a spark in Justin. His mom's intuition combined with his own digital sleuthing had proven fruitful. This wasn't just some quirky academic. This was a deliberate deception. And now Justin, with his youthful zeal and command of the internet's hidden corners, felt a surge of responsibility. His mom had started this, but he was uniquely equipped to push it further. He saw it as a game, a puzzle, a real-life spy novel playing out in their sleepy town. But little did he know, the game was far more dangerous than any fictional adventure. Justin decided he needed more than just online searches. He needed to observe. He started tailing Dr. Thorne, subtly at first. He'd coincidentally leave the library at the same time, maintaining a discreet distance. He noticed Dr. Thorne never lingered, never made personal stops. He went straight from the library to a modest, rented room above a defunct bakery on the edge of town. No car, always on foot, or occasionally taking the local bus. This suggested a deliberate attempt to remain inconspicuous, to leave minimal trace. No credit card receipts from gas stations, no parking tickets, just cash, anonymity, and foot traffic. One evening, Justin decided to escalate. He waited until Dr. Thorne had settled into his room, lights on, and then, under the cover of dusk, he cautiously approached the old bakery building. He noticed a small, external fire escape leading up to the second-floor window of Thorne's room. It was rusty, creaky, but functional. A crazy idea formed in his mind. He was good with locks, good with electronics. Could he get a closer look? Maybe find something definitive. He knew it was risky, reckless even, but the adrenaline surged. His mom was worried and he felt a growing need to protect her to solve this. He decided against breaking in directly. Too risky, too obvious. Instead, he employed a more subtle tactic. He'd seen Dr. Thorne use a specific, older model of burner phone, often leaving it on a windowsill to charge. Justin, using some specialized equipment he'd built for a college project, a miniature, high-frequency listening device disguised as a USB charger, decided to try a shot in the dark. He carefully scaled the fire escape one night, after ensuring Thorne's lights were out and the street was deserted. With practiced stealth, he attached the device to the exterior window frame, near where the phone usually charged, hoping it would pick up ambient electrical signals. It was a long shot, but if the phone was transmitting or receiving anything unusual, even encrypted signals, his device might detect it. He'd learned enough about radio frequency analysis in his spare time to know it was possible, if improbable. The next morning, back in the safety of his own room, Justin downloaded the data from his device. It was mostly static, noise, the usual electromagnetic soup of a small town. But then, buried within the noise, he found it. A faint, repetitive burst of modulated signals. Not a phone call, not a text message. Something else. Something structured. The signals were short, fast, and seemed to be transmitted at precise intervals, often in the dead of night. And the frequency, it was unusual, not what a standard cell phone or Wi-Fi signal would use. It was a frequency band often associated with older, more specialized communication. He ran the pattern through some open-source decoders he'd tinkered with. No immediate match. But the pattern, the deliberate nature of the transmissions, was unmistakable. Someone was sending coded messages. And the transmitter was right there in Dr. Thorne's room. Justin's heart pounded. This was it. This wasn't just a librarian's hunch anymore. This was concrete, undeniable evidence of clandestine activity. He immediately called his mother, his voice barely containing his excitement and fear. "Mom, you were right. He's not just a fake academic. He's transmitting something. I picked up coded signals from his room. Old school, short burst stuff, not commercial, like something out of an old spy movie." With Justin's discovery of the coded transmissions, the blurry picture of Dr. Thorne snapped into terrifying focus. This wasn't just a quirky researcher with a false identity. This was an active agent, but an agent for whom? And for what purpose in their sleepy American town, decades after the Cold War had supposedly ended? Brenda, her mind reeling, instinctively turned back to the one place she knew best, the library, the archives. The very materials Dr. Thorne had been so obsessively studying. If he was an operative, then his research was a cover, a carefully constructed illusion to mask his true objective. But what if the cover also contained clues? Brenda pulled every document Dr. Thorne had ever requested, every newspaper clipping, every patent application, every community college yearbook. She spread them out across the large reading table, working late into the night, Justin by her side, monitoring for any sign of Thorne's return. They looked for connections, for patterns, not just in the data Thorne collected, but in the types of data. He was always interested in places that had dual civilian and military applications, Brenda murmured, pointing to a faded blueprint of the abandoned textile mill. It made parachutes during the war, then went back to fabric. But for a short period, it had a government contract for some kind of specialized material testing. Justin scanned a microfiche copy of an old newspaper, and these classified ads not just lost pets. Look here. Experienced engineer seeks part-time work, comfortable with precision machinery. Or German-speaking tutor available, former academic. Brenda's eyes darted across the pages. He wasn't just looking for individuals, he was looking for skills, for knowledge that might have gone unnoticed. She remembered Thorne's intense focus on the community college yearbooks. He wasn't looking at the popular kids, he was looking at the quiet ones, the science club, the chess club, the ones who might have gone on to specialized fields. Then a sudden, sharp intake of breath from Brenda. She had been reviewing the original logbooks for archive access, the handwritten entries of every patron who had requested access to the restricted special collections room, a small, climate-controlled vault containing truly rare and sensitive materials. Dr. Thorne had signed in multiple times. His signature was always precise, legible, but just below one of his entries, dating back a few weeks, was a faint, almost invisible smudge. It wasn't ink. It was an impression, as if a pen had pressed through a piece of paper laid over the logbook. Brenda, with her librarian's eye for detail, carefully dusted the page with powdered graphite she kept for restoring old documents. The faint impression appeared, a series of Cyrillic letters, a name, but not just any name, a Russian name. One that sounded vaguely familiar from news reports she'd half-read decades ago. Justin, seeing her face drain of color, leaned in. "What is it, Mom?" Brenda pointed a trembling finger at the faint impression. He signed in with a different name, or someone else did, using his logbook as a surface. But this is a Russian name, and it's not random. I remember seeing this name or something like it in an old newspaper archive, related to an incident, years ago. She rushed to a shelf containing decades of national newspapers, pulling out a thick, bound volume from 1968. She flipped frantically through the pages, her heart hammering. Finally, she found it. A small, almost forgotten article on page 5. Soviet defectors' claims unsubstantiated. The article mentioned a minor, low-level Soviet operative who had allegedly attempted to defect in the late 1960s, claiming to have information about a network of sleeper agents in various American industrial towns. His name, translated, was Alexei Volkov, and the Cyrillic impression on the logbook, faint but clear, was Alexei Volkov. Justin stared at the name, then at the article. Sleeper agents in American industrial towns. Mom, Sterling had that old munitions factory and the textile mill and the community college that trained technicians for those places. If Volkov was talking about a network and Dr. Thorne is digging into these exact places and these exact people. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The pieces were locking into place with a terrifying click. Dr. Thorne wasn't just looking for obscure history. He was looking for people, for a network, for something that the Cold War had left behind, now stirring back to life. The transmissions Justin had picked up, the careful mapping of the library, the false identity, the detailed interest in local talent and industry specifically from a bygone era, it all pointed to one chilling conclusion. Dr. Elias Thorne was not just a Soviet spy. He was connected to this Soviet spy, Alexei Volkov. He was either looking for the remnants of Volkov's alleged network, or perhaps he was Volkov or someone connected to him activating it. The Cold War wasn't just a history book for Brenda and Justin anymore. It was alive. It was here, in Sterling. And its shadow, long thought vanished, was now falling directly over them. They hadn't just stumbled upon a mystery. They had awakened a ghost, a dangerous operative from a past that refused to stay buried. They had found the real link, and it was Soviet steel. This was no longer a quiet investigation. This was a direct confrontation with a deadly legacy, a confrontation they were wholly unprepared for. What would they do with this explosive knowledge? And how would they confront a man who operated in the shadows, a ghost from a war that never truly ended? The revelation of Alexei Volkov and the chilling possibility of a dormant network of sleeper agents had transformed Brenda and Justin from curious onlookers into reluctant detectives. But identifying the threat was only the first step. They needed to understand its scope. If Thorne was looking for something or someone, he wasn't doing it randomly. His meticulous, almost obsessive, interest in seemingly mundane local records had to be a roadmap. Their new mission, to find out what or who he was looking for and why. Their starting point was the meticulous list Brenda had kept of every single item Dr. Thorne had requested. Every newspaper archive, every microfiche of patent applications, every obscure technical journal, every community college yearbook. She spread them out across the large reading table, working late into the night, Justin by her side, monitoring for any sign of Thorne's return. They looked for connections, for patterns, not just in the data Thorne collected, but in the types of data. "Look at this," Justin said one night, his finger tracing a name in a 1962 community college yearbook. Walter Higgins, majored in electrical engineering, specialized in radio frequency transmission. He then pointed to a classified ad from a 1968 Sterling Gazette. "Experienced electrical engineer seeks part-time work, comfortable with precision machinery." Or "German-speaking tutor available, former academic." Brenda nodded, her eyes scanning her notes. Thorne spent an entire afternoon on that specific issue of the Gazette. He took detailed notes on that ad. "And then," Justin continued, his voice lowering, "I can't find any public record of Walter Higgins after 1968. No death certificate, no property sales, no forwarding address, just gone. One instance could be a coincidence. Two might be a fluke." But as they dug deeper, the pattern began to emerge, stark and terrifying. They found Martha Jenkins, a brilliant chemical engineer who had patented a process for a new type of polymer in 1959. Thorne had spent hours studying that patent. Martha, too, vanished from all records in 1970. Then there was Robert Maxwell, a skilled machinist, expert in precision fabrication, who worked at the old munitions factory and briefly consulted for a mysterious government project before disappearing in 1972. The list grew. It wasn't just random people. These were individuals with very specific, often technical skill sets. Engineers, scientists, master craftsmen, people who possessed knowledge that could be valuable in a technological arms race. What was most unsettling was the official narrative, or lack thereof, for each disappearance. Walter Higgins had supposedly moved west for a new opportunity. Martha Jenkins suffered a nervous breakdown and was institutionalized out of state. Robert Maxwell just packed up and left without a word. Each story was just plausible enough, just vague enough, to prevent further inquiry in a time before the internet made every detail searchable. These weren't unsolved crimes that made headlines. These were quiet vanishings, smoothed over by time and a lack of digital footprints. "He's not just looking for information, Mom," Justin whispered, his voice hoarse from hours of searching. "He's looking for people, or what happened to them." Brenda shivered, and not just people. People with specific talents, talents that would have been valuable during the Cold War, or even now. The implication hung heavy in the air. Was Thorne attempting to reactivate these sleeper agents? Or was he hunting them down, perhaps because they had become liabilities, or something far more sinister? While Brenda meticulously pieced together the threads of disappearances from the past, Justin was waging a different kind of war, against the encrypted signals he had intercepted from Dr. Thorne's room. His mini-listening device had captured bursts of what he now knew was some form of Morse code, but transmitted at a speed and frequency that made it almost impossible to discern without specialized equipment. He spent every spare moment in his makeshift lab, a corner of the library's boiler room, surrounded by monitors, wires, and the hum of old machinery. His initial attempts to decode were met with frustration. The signals were short, precise, and highly modulated. They weren't standard Morse, but a variation, perhaps with an extra layer of encryption. He tried every open-source decryption tool he could find, every frequency analysis program, but the data remained an inscrutable mess of squiggles and noise. It's like trying to understand a conversation when you only hear every 10th word, and that word is in a language you barely know, he grumbled to Brenda one morning, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Brenda, however, had an idea. "Justin, think about where he did his research. What specific things did he focus on? The local industrial patents, the old radio and electronics shops. What if the key isn't just how it's encoded, but what it's encoded with? She remembered Thorne's intense focus on an obscure 1950s textbook on radio communication for amateur enthusiasts, which contained detailed schematics for building simple transmitters and receivers. And she recalled his fascination with an old, defunct electronics store in Sterling, whose former owner had been a ham radio operator during WWII. A light bulb flickered for Justin. Ham radio operators. They often used specific, local protocols or coded messages to save transmission time, especially during times of war or national emergency. And these protocols were sometimes shared informally, passed down through local clubs. He remembered Thorne sketching diagrams of custom antennas and old-school vacuum tube circuits. He wasn't just interested in what they built, Mom, but how they communicated, the mechanisms. He dove back into his research, this time focusing on local ham radio clubs from the 1950s and 60s, cross-referencing their member lists with the names Thorne had scrutinized. And then he found it. A small, self-published manual from the Sterling Amateur Radio League, dated 1963, discovered by Brenda tucked away in a box of donated historical ephemera. It contained not only instructions for building specific equipment, but also a detailed section on efficient message compression techniques, and a list of commonly used local shorthand codes for rapid communication. It even had a few examples of burst transmission exercises, using very specific timing and frequency shifts. This wasn't a universal key, but it was a Rosetta Stone for local communication methods of the era. With renewed vigor, Justin fed the manual's information into his analysis software. The squiggles on his screen began to coalesce. The noise started to resolve into patterns. He worked feverishly, translating the local shorthand, matching frequency shifts to specific character sets. The first message to emerge, haltingly word by word, sent a chill down his spine. Report received. Status, orange, awaiting activation of target sigil. Initiate recon of Site Beta 7. Verify compliance. No compromise, repeat, no compromise. Brenda, standing over his shoulder, gasped. Orange, sigil, recon, this sounds like military intelligence. Justin nodded, his face pale. It's clearly a coded message. Site Beta 7 must be a location, and target sigil, that's the part I don't understand yet, but no compromise, that sounds pretty deadly. With the decoded message, Brenda and Justin now had a terrifying glimpse into Dr. Thorne's mission. Site Beta 7 was a location, and target sigil was something to be activated. But what? And where? The coded communication was constant, demanding precision and secrecy. They needed to figure out Thorne's objective, and they needed to do it quickly before he acted. Their focus shifted back to the materials Thorne had studied, but this time with the added context of Site Beta 7 and target sigil. Brenda pored over every map Thorne had requested, every detailed drawing, every patent application. Her librarian's brain, honed by decades of cataloging and cross-referencing, began to see what Thorne saw. She noticed a recurring theme in his research. Anything related to magnetic fields, electromagnetic pulses, EMPs, or advanced electrical components from the mid-20th century. He had spent weeks on patents filed by a local, eccentric inventor named Silas Albright. Albright was a recluse, known for his fantastical theories about harnessing atmospheric energies and controlling localized gravitational forces. Most of his patents were dismissed as pseudoscience, but one, filed in 1965, caught Brenda's eye. It was for a localized electromagnetic field generator, a device designed, according to Albright's grandiose claims, to disrupt and redirect shortwave radio transmissions within a defined perimeter. The patent drawings, meticulous and complex, showed a large, antenna-like structure, heavily shielded and designed to be remotely activated. "This is it," Brenda breathed, pushing the brittle patent document across the table to Justin. Albright's field generator. Thorne was obsessed with this. He even asked for any personal papers Albright might have donated. We have a small box, I remember, mostly just journals and sketches. Justin, always one step ahead in his thinking, immediately made the connection. A device to disrupt radio transmissions. What if Site Beta 7 isn't just a place, but a location where something already exists or can be built based on these plans? And Target Sigil. What if it's not a thing to be activated, but a signal to be blocked or redirected? They knew Albright's old workshop was still standing, abandoned for decades on the outskirts of Sterling, a crumbling, ivy-covered building that locals whispered was haunted. It had been sold for back taxes years ago and now sat idle, a forgotten relic. It was exactly the kind of out-of-the-way, historically significant and easily overlooked site that a spy would exploit. Could this be Site Beta 7? Brenda then recalled another detail. Dr. Thorne had specifically asked about an antique grandfather clock that stood in the library's main reading room. It was a beautiful, ornate piece, dating back to the late 1800s, donated by one of Sterling's founding families. He hadn't just admired it, he'd asked about its internal mechanism, its chime, its history. At the time, Brenda had assumed it was another one of his eccentric interests in the tangential history of the town. Now it screamed suspicion. He asked about the clock, Brenda murmured, her eyes distant. He asked about the donor, the Caldwell family. And he asked if any of their personal effects were still in the archives. I told him we had a small collection of Caldwell family correspondence and business ledgers. Justin looked at her, his brows furrowed. The clock, why would a spy care about an old clock? Brenda's librarian's intuition, finely tuned to the nuances of historical objects, sparked. Think about it, Justin. What if it's not just a clock? What if it's a dead drop, or a hidden message within it? They knew they couldn't openly examine the clock, not with Thorne still in the building, observing them. They decided to wait until late that night. After Thorne left, and after ensuring the library was truly empty, they approached the towering clock in the silent, moonlit reading room. It was imposing, its pendulum swinging with a soft, hypnotic tick-tock. Brenda carefully opened the front panel to reveal the intricate brass workings. Nothing seemed out of place. But then Justin, with his youthful agility, reached behind the heavy, carved oak case, feeling along the dark wood. His fingers brushed against something. A small, almost invisible seam. He pressed. A faint click echoed in the silent room. A small, shallow compartment, no bigger than a matchbox, slid open at the base of the clock's interior. Inside, nestled in the velvet lining, was a single, small, tarnished silver locket. It was plain, unadorned, and clearly very old. As Brenda gently opened it, a faint, almost faded photograph was revealed on one side. A young man in an old-fashioned military uniform, smiling faintly. On the other side, painstakingly etched into the silver, were three letters. AV. The locket, with its faded photograph and the etched initials AV, was more than a mere clue. It was a physical link, a direct touch from the past. Alexei Volkov had not only been here, but he had left a personal item, perhaps a sentimental one, hidden in the library itself. This raised a crucial question. Was Volkov the ghost haunting their investigation, or was he, against all odds, still alive? And if so, was Dr. Thorne looking for him, or was he working for him? The target sigil from the decoded message now took on a terrifying new dimension. Brenda and Justin realized they needed to understand the significance of the locket. Why leave it there? Was it a landmark, a code, a personal message? Brenda remembered Dr. Thorne's interest in the Caldwell family, the clock's donors. She pulled out the Caldwell family correspondence she had mentioned earlier, a stack of letters and ledgers, mostly mundane. But then, tucked inside an old family Bible, she found a series of cryptic journal entries by a distant Caldwell relative, a woman named Elena, who had been a quiet and observant library assistant in the late 1960s. Elena's entries, written in a florid, almost poetic hand, spoke of a quiet man who loved books but seemed to listen to the silence more than the words. She mentioned his gentle sorrow and eyes that saw more than they let on. And then a specific entry. He spoke today of his homeland, of the Iron Curtain, and a hidden path for truth. He spoke of a sigil that would guide others should he fall. A compass, he called it, etched in stone at the place where Sterling's past meets its future. Justin's eyes snapped to Brenda's. Sigil, a compass etched in stone, at the place where Sterling's past meets its future. Where Sterling's past meets its future. Brenda repeated, her mind racing through local landmarks. The old mill, the original town hall. Then it clicked. Sterling had a small, mostly forgotten public park called Founders Green. In its center stood a large granite monument, erected in 1965, commemorating Sterling's founders and its early industries. Around the base of the monument, in relief carvings, were images of pioneers, farmers, artisans, and then, strikingly, a depiction of a large radio antenna, a symbol of Sterling's early contributions to communication technology. And at the very bottom, almost worn away by time, was a small, circular carving. A compass rose. A sigil. Founders Green, Brenda exclaimed, grabbing her keys. The monument. It has a compass rose carved into its base. It was dedicated in 1965, the year Silas Albright patented his field generator, and it depicts a radio antenna. The pieces were falling into place with a horrifying speed. Site Beta 7 was almost certainly Albright's abandoned workshop, where the electromagnetic field generator could be built or reactivated. The target sigil was the compass rose on the Founders Green monument, but what was its purpose? They raced to the park, the air now thick with the smell of approaching rain. The monument stood silently under the streetlights, casting long shadows. Justin immediately knelt at its base, tracing the worn carving of the compass rose. He noticed something Brenda hadn't, a tiny, almost invisible cavity within the center of the carved compass. It was designed to hold something. And then, Justin remembered another detail from Thorne's research. His intense interest in a seemingly innocuous collection of rare earth magnets from the 1960s, donated by a local high school science teacher. The magnets were unusually strong for their size, made from an alloy that was cutting edge for its time. Thorne had requested to examine them under a microscope, taking detailed notes on their specific crystalline structure and magnetic properties. "Mom," Justin said, his voice barely a whisper, "what if the sigil isn't just the compass rose itself, but what's placed into it? What if Volkov left behind a specially coded magnetic key designed to fit here, that only activates something when the right magnetic field is introduced?" Suddenly, the decoded message about activation of target sigil made chilling sense. It wasn't about destroying something, but activating it. Activating what? The rain began to fall, cold and hard. Just then a faint light flickered in the distance, the direction of Albright's old workshop. And then they heard it, the low, guttural growl of a vehicle. A black, unmarked van moving slowly down the street, its headlights off, its silhouette barely visible against the stormy sky. It was heading towards Founders Green. And then they saw him, Dr. Thorne. He emerged from the van holding something small and metallic in his hand. He walked directly towards the monument, his figure silhouetted against the flash of lightning. His objective was clear. He was here to activate the target sigil. He was here to initiate whatever terrifying plan had been dormant for decades. The Cold War wasn't just in the library archives. It was happening right now in their park, in their town. Brenda and Justin had uncovered the spy, decoded his messages, and pieced together his ultimate goal. But they were too late. The clock was ticking, and they were standing directly in the path of a long-dormant weapon, about to be unleashed. The air crackled with more than just the coming storm. It crackled with danger, with the weight of history, and with the terrifying realization that they were no longer just observers. They were targets. Dr. Thorne reached the base of the granite monument, oblivious to the two terrified figures watching him from the shadows. He knelt, his movements precise, almost ritualistic despite the driving rain. His hand, steady as a surgeon's, moved to the small, circular indentation in the carved compass rose. He produced the magnetic object, a small, dull gray cylinder, no bigger than a thimble, yet humming with an almost imperceptible energy. He inserted it into the cavity. For a moment, nothing happened, only the relentless rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Then a low, resonant hum emanated from the monument itself. The granite, cold and inert moments before, seemed to vibrate. A faint, ethereal blue light pulsed from the compass rose, growing in intensity, casting an otherworldly glow on Thorne's impassive face. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't an EMP. It was something far more subtle, far more insidious. The air around the monument began to shimmer, distorting the rain and the light like a heat haze. The hum deepened, rising in pitch, becoming a palpable pressure against Brenda and Justin's eardrums. "He's activating the EMF generator," Justin whispered, his voice strained. "The one from Albright's patent, but it's not at the workshop. It's here." Brenda stared, her mind racing. The monument wasn't just a marker, it was a conduit, a cleverly disguised, remotely activated component of a larger system. The hum intensified, a low throb that resonated deep in their chests. The faint blue light began to pulse outwards, creating an expanding dome of shimmering distortion, slowly engulfing the Founder's green. They couldn't wait. They burst from their cover, sprinting towards the monument. "Thorne, stop!" Brenda yelled, her voice barely audible above the hum. Thorne straightened, turning slowly. His face, illuminated by the pulsing blue light, was utterly devoid of surprise. He had expected them. His eyes, cold and analytical, held a hint of grim satisfaction. "Ah, Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller, always so inquisitive, a dangerous trait in your line of work." His voice, though calm, was tinged with an unfamiliar metallic edge, as if the device's hum was vibrating through him. "What are you doing?" Justin demanded, gesturing wildly at the shimmering dome. "What is this thing?" Thorne smiled, a thin, humorless line. "This, young man, is Volkov's masterpiece, the echo chamber. Not a weapon of destruction, no, that was never Alexei's way. He preferred the long game. The quiet erosion." He paused, savoring the moment. "This monument, you see, was built with special components, impregnated with Silas Albright's unique magnetic alloys, funded by, shall we say, a deeply sympathetic patron of the arts. It's a localized, highly sophisticated communication disruption field." Brenda's eyes widened. "A communication disruption, not an EMP, WHY. "Because an EMP is crude," Thorne explained, his gaze sweeping across the town, now visible through the shimmering distortion. "Too obvious, too destructive. This is precise. This device, once fully activated, creates a bubble of electromagnetic interference. Not enough to stop all communication, no, but enough to subtly corrupt specific types of data, to introduce undetectable errors into satellite uplinks, to degrade GPS signals by mere meters, enough to cause critical infrastructure to falter, to subtly alter financial transactions, to create just enough noise in secure military transmissions to cause doubt, confusion, mistrust." He turned back to them, his eyes gleaming. Volkov understood that the real battle in the Cold War, and indeed any war, is fought not with bombs but with information, with trust, or the lack thereof. His sleeper agents weren't saboteurs. They were ghost engineers, ghost scientists. Their knowledge, combined with devices like this, was meant to plant seeds of chaos, doubt, and systemic failure, to make the enemy unravel from within without ever firing a shot. "And the missing people?" Brenda asked, her voice trembling. "Walter Higgins, Martha Jenkins, Robert Maxwell." Thorne's expression remained impassive. "They were not missing, Mrs. Miller. They were recruited, voluntarily in most cases, though perhaps under duress for some. Brilliant minds disillusioned by their own country, eager for a cause. They built and maintained parts of this network. The Site Beta 7 at Albright's workshop was where the secondary, more powerful M components were assembled, ready for deployment. This monument, the echo chamber, was the primary activator, the long-term, subtly insidious weapon Volkov left behind. But the Cold War is over. Justin shouted, anger rising. Why now? Why activate it now? Thorne's smile was grim. The Cold War, young man, never truly ended. It merely evolved. And certain geopolitical forces have decided it is time for Volkov's legacy to finally bear fruit. The world is ripe for subtle destabilization, for the erosion of faith in systems. And Sterling, Pennsylvania, with its historical connections to military industry, its quiet obscurity, and its convenient lack of overt surveillance, was always the perfect staging ground. A forgotten pawn in a very long game. The disorienting pulse from Thorne's device sent Brenda and Justin stumbling, their vision blurring, their ears ringing. Thorne, calm and collected, turned and moved swiftly towards his unmarked van parked a few yards away. The blue shimmer from the monument had expanded, now encompassing the entire park, creating an eerie, almost dreamlike barrier. They had to stop him. Not just because he was escaping, but because whatever he had just activated, the echo chamber, was now corrupting everything. Justin, the van. Brenda cried, shaking off the lingering nausea. They sprinted, their legs heavy, towards the vehicle, but Thorne was already in the driver's seat, the engine revving. With a screech of tires, he pulled away, disappearing into the rainy night. They were left stranded in the shimmering, humming bubble of the echo chamber, the soundscape distorted, the air thick with an invisible menace. Their initial shock quickly turned to grim determination. We have to disable it. Justin yelled, pointing at the monument. I saw him insert the magnetic key. If we can get it out, maybe it will stop. They rushed to the monument. The blue light pulsed violently, and the hum was now a throbbing pain in their skulls. Justin tried to pry out the small cylindrical key, but it was locked firmly in place, secured by an unseen mechanism. It's sealed. He grunted, frustrated. I need tools, or a way to disrupt its internal circuit. Brenda's mind, despite the throbbing pain, was already formulating a plan. Thorne had revealed too much. The Site Beta 7, Albright's workshop, contained secondary, more powerful M components. The echo chamber at the monument was the activator, but perhaps not the sole source of the full disruption. If they couldn't disable the monument, they had to go to the source, or at least the other key location Thorne had revealed. Albright's workshop. Brenda shouted, pulling Justin away from the monument. He said the other components were there. There might be a master control, or at least a way to overload it. But how do we get there? Justin protested, wiping rain from his eyes. He just drove off, and we can't just walk into a spy's lair. He thinks he's escaped, Brenda said, a fierce glint in her eyes. He thinks he's won, but he doesn't know MY Library. They ran, not towards the workshop, but back towards the Sterling Public Library, its imposing Gothic facade looming through the rain. The shimmering field of the echo chamber seemed to stretch its tendrils towards the town, the streetlights flickering erratically as they ran. They burst through the library's heavy doors, slamming them shut behind them. The hum was less oppressive inside, but still a faint, unsettling vibration in the air. Mom, what are we doing here? Justin asked, confused. Volkov wasn't just a spy, Justin, Brenda panted, leading him through the main hall. He was a man who planned. He used this library for his research, for his dead drops. He knew this building, and so do I better than anyone. She led him past the front desk, not to the back rooms, but to a dusty, rarely used storage area behind the grand fireplace in the main reading room, a place only a librarian of 20 years would know intimately. This fireplace, she explained, gesturing to the ornate brickwork, was actually a ventilation shaft for the old coal furnace. But the original blueprints, the ones Thorne studied so obsessively, showed a small, disused access tunnel connected to it. A service route for pipes that ran beneath the town, leading to the old industrial district. You mean a secret tunnel? Justin asked, his eyes wide, like in the adventure books. Precisely, Brenda said, already pushing aside a rickety shelf filled with old newspapers. She found a loose brick hidden behind a century of grime and twisted it. With a soft click, a section of the brickwork swung inwards, revealing a dark, narrow passage. A musty, earthy smell wafted out. It's a shortcut, a way to move unseen, and it leads directly to Albright's old workshop, or at least very close to it. Justin stared at the opening. This was it. No more watching, no more deducing. This was active participation, a desperate attempt to stop a ticking Cold War legacy. "All right, Mom," he said, pulling out his phone, its signal already erratic. "Let's go, but we need a plan. If he's there, he'll be waiting." Brenda nodded, her face grim. "He'll be waiting for us to make a move, but he won't expect us to move through the earth itself, and he won't expect a librarian to be leading the charge." She grabbed a heavy, antique flashlight from a shelf, its beam cutting a shaky path into the darkness of the tunnel. "We go in. We find a way to disable that generator, and we stop this echo chamber before it spreads its silence across the world." Their quiet library, a place of peace and knowledge, had just transformed into the hidden entrance to a subterranean battleground, and Brenda, the unassuming librarian, was ready to fight for its future. The tunnel was damp and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of earth and forgotten things. Brenda led the way, her flashlight beam dancing ahead, revealing ancient pipes, cobwebs, and the occasional startled rodent. Justin followed closely, his tech-savvy mind already plotting how he could use the tunnel's proximity to disrupt Thorne's communications or the device itself. They emerged, breathless and covered in dust, into a dense patch of overgrown woods, just 100 yards from Albright's abandoned workshop. The building stood dark and silent, a skeletal silhouette against the stormy sky, its windows like vacant eyes. As they crept closer, they saw it. The back door of the workshop was ajar, a faint glow emanating from within. Thorne was there. They heard the muffled clanging of metal, the whirring of machinery. He was actively engaging with the secondary components, perhaps calibrating them or integrating them with the echo chamber now active at the monument. Brenda and Justin exchanged a look. This was it. No backup, just them against a highly trained operative. They slipped inside the workshop. The air was heavy with the smell of ozone and old electronics. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting various pieces of archaic-looking machinery, coils, vacuum tubes, banks of flickering dials. In the center of it all, Thorne worked feverishly, his back to them, connecting cables to a large metallic sphere that pulsed with the same faint blue light as the monument. This was Albright's EMF generator, made monstrous, THORNE. Brenda's voice echoed in the cavernous space. He spun around, startled. His eyes, for the first time, showed a flicker of genuine surprise, quickly masked by anger. "How did you find me?" he hissed, his face contorted. "The tunnel. Volkov's personal escape route, you found it. Remarkable, annoying." He lunged, a swift, practiced movement. Brenda, caught off guard, stumbled back. But Justin, quicker, raised his phone and activated a device he'd been working on, a directional high-frequency sound emitter designed to disrupt local electronics. It emitted a piercing, focused shriek that cut through the air. Thorne faltered, clutching his head, momentarily disoriented. "Get to the generator," Brenda yelled, pushing past him as he staggered. Justin, seizing the opportunity, rushed towards the humming sphere. As he reached it, Thorne recovered, grabbing Brenda from behind. He had a small, wicked-looking knife, its blade glinting. "One more step, boy, and your mother dies," he snarled, pressing the knife against Brenda's throat. Justin froze, his hand hovering over the generator's control panel. "Don't do it, Justin." Brenda choked, struggling in Thorne's grasp. "Stop him, he can't win." Thorne laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. "Brave, foolish. You think you can stop decades of planning. Volkov's legacy is finally here. And I will see it through." "Volkov's legacy?" Justin retorted, his eyes narrowed. "You're not just some agent, are you? You're his son, aren't you?" He remembered the locket, the faded picture of the young man in uniform. The initials AV, the strange sentimentality. Thorne's eyes flared, a flicker of raw emotion quickly suppressed. "Clever boy, you're learning too much. Yes, I am Volkov, Alexei Volkov Jr., My father, he believed in this. He died a broken man, his work unfinished. I promised him I would complete it. All these years, building, planning, waiting for the precise geopolitical moment, and now it's finally here. The hum from the generator intensified, the blue light growing brighter, pulsing with an alarming rhythm. The entire workshop seemed to vibrate. The echo chamber was almost at full power. Suddenly, from the open back door, a new voice cut through the hum. "I wouldn't be so sure, Mr. Volkov." A figure stepped into the doorway, silhouetted against the stormy night. Not the police, not the FBI. It was Mr. Henderson, the quiet, unassuming history professor from the local community college, the one who had occasionally frequented the library, sharing a quiet word with Brenda about research methods. He held a small, antique pistol, steady and unwavering, pointed directly at Thorne. "Professor Henderson." Brenda gasped, utterly stunned. "An old friend of your father, Alexei," Henderson said, his voice calm, betraying no emotion. "A member of his original network, but one who defected fully, truly. Unlike your father, I believed in peace, not endless subversion. I have been watching you, Alexei Jr., since you first stepped foot in this town. You were sloppy, too sentimental, using your father's old hidey holes. I knew you'd come for the echo chamber." Thorne, Alexei Jr., snarled, momentarily distracted by this unexpected turn. "You traitor." Henderson's aim remained steady. "A necessary choice for a world that deserves to move beyond this madness. Drop the knife, Alexei, it's over." The standoff was absolute. Alexei Volkov Jr., knife at Brenda's throat. Justin, frozen by fear for his mother. Professor Henderson, a seemingly mild-mannered academic, now a stone-faced agent, pistol aimed steadily. The hum of Albright's EMF generator pulsed relentlessly, its blue light bathing the tense scene in an infernal glow. The echo chamber was screaming into life. "Drop it, Alexei," Henderson repeated, his voice low and firm. "You've been compromised. Your plan ends here." Alexei Jr. hesitated, his eyes darting between Henderson and the generator. His father's legacy, so close, so infuriatingly close. He knew he couldn't take on Henderson and keep Brenda as a hostage without risking both his life and his mission. With a frustrated roar, he shoved Brenda towards Justin, then lunged, not at Henderson, but at a side door, bursting through it and vanishing into the rainy night. Justin, the generator. Brenda screamed, pushing herself off the floor. Henderson, after a moment's hesitation, lowered his pistol. "He's not the primary threat now, the device is." He strode towards the humming sphere, assessing it with a professional eye. "It's fully engaged. It's radiating. We need to shut it down now." Justin, his hands trembling, stared at the complex array of dials and wires. "I don't know how to turn it off. It's too complex. Overloading it might just trigger a full EMP burst, not just a disruption." Brenda's mind raced. Overload, disruption, Albright's patents, Volkov's plans. She remembered Thorne's earlier revelation. The real battle is fought not with bombs but with information, with trust. And the echo chamber's purpose, to subtly corrupt specific types of data. She had a flash of inspiration, linking back to Thorne's research into outdated military communication protocols. "Professor Henderson," Brenda said urgently, "Thorne studied old military frequency jamming techniques, the ones developed to counteract early Soviet radio signals. He wasn't just interested in Albright's design, but in how it could be disrupted."